The White House has always stood as the ultimate symbol of power, stability, and continuity in the American imagination. Tourists from across the world gather at its gates, snapping pictures of its grand columns, the fountains sparkling in the sunlight, the flag rippling against the sky. For most, it represents democracy and dignity. But as Empire Leaks has uncovered time and again, what lies behind the polished facade is rarely so pure. Every window hides a story, every hallway whispers with secrets, and every smile at the podium may mask a darker truth. Today, we take you inside one of the most shocking stories buried deep within the White House. A secret so well guarded that even those closest to the first family never dared to speak it aloud. This is the tale of a first lady whose life, carefully crafted for the cameras, concealed a secret that, once revealed, would shatter the very image of innocence America believed in. On the surface, she was everything a first lady was expected to be. Graceful, intelligent, charitable, a woman who could balance motherhood, diplomacy, and the pressure of being forever in the spotlight. Magazines celebrated her sense of style, newspapers praised her speeches, and ordinary Americans spoke of her as America's sweetheart, the perfect companion to the president. She was introduced to the public as the backbone of a marriage that symbolized stability. But that was the story painted by the press, a story meant to be consumed like a fairy tale. Behind closed doors, away from the camera flashes, the truth was unraveling. In politics, image is everything. Campaign advisors know it, presidents know it, and first ladies know it too. The American public doesn't just vote for policies. They vote for a vision, a dream, an idea of perfection they can hold on to. And what better image to present than a loving couple holding hands on the debate stage, smiling at each other as if their bond were unbreakable. But in Washington, the tighter the smiles, the darker the shadows. Rumors began to swirl, hushed conversations among staffers, fleeting whispers from journalists who heard something but couldn't publish. These whispers suggested that the First Lady wasn't the flawless figure she appeared to be, and that behind her charm and composure, there was a darkness that no one wanted to believe could exist. What happens when love curdles into bitterness? When loyalty transforms into resentment? When power corrupts not just presidents, but those closest to them? Our story begins not in the Oval Office, not on the campaign trail, but in the quiet corners of a mansion where politics and intimacy collided. This is where the First Lady's secret began, a secret so dangerous it threatened not only a marriage but the stability of an entire administration. As Empire Leaks, our mission has always been to look where others refuse, to tell the stories hidden in plain sight. And so we ask, what if the woman standing beside the most powerful man in the world was not the silent partner she appeared to be, but rather the architect of a scandal that could shake the foundations of American politics? What if her carefully polished smile concealed not just unhappiness, but guilt? And what if the truth, once exposed, would force America to rethink everything it believed about love, loyalty, and the pursuit of power inside the White House? The public has always had a fascination with first ladies. From Jackie Kennedy's elegance to Michelle Obama's advocacy, from Hillary Clinton's resilience to Jill Biden's warmth, each has been scrutinized, celebrated, criticized, and mythologized. But none have been accused of the story we are about to tell. A story of betrayal, revenge, and the darkest kind of love. The woman at the center of this story, once seen as a symbol of unity, would come to represent division. Not just between herself and her husband, but between the image America consumed and the truth America was never meant to know. This is not a fairy tale. This is not a polished press release written by campaign strategists. This is a story of blood, betrayal, and secrets whispered in corridors where power thrives. As we peel back the layers, we will show you how a marriage once idolized by millions was in fact rotting from the inside out. We will reveal how whispers of betrayal grew into undeniable evidence, and how the First Lady's dark secret would eventually crawl from the shadows, leaving behind a trail of destruction. Imagine the pressure of standing beside a man hailed as the leader of the free world, while knowing that every glance, every gesture, every word you speak is dissected not just by political analysts, but by millions of eyes across the globe. For the First Lady in our story, that pressure wasn't just political. It was personal. Her marriage had become a prison, her role a mask, and her public image a cage. The more she smiled, the deeper her secrets buried themselves. Until one day, the cracks could no longer be hidden. As we open this story, remember this. History books often glorify leaders and their partners, but history is written by those who survive scandals, not by those destroyed by them. And yet, sometimes the truth survives, tucked away in documents, whispered in interviews, hidden in plain sight. What you are about to hear is not the story they told you on television. It is not the smiling Christmas card photo mailed to millions of households. It is not the fairy tale wedding replayed on anniversary specials. This is the untold side, the dark side, the side the White House never wanted you to see. And so, with the floodlights turned away and the microphone switched off, we begin our journey into the shadows of America's most powerful home. Welcome to Empire Leaks. Welcome to the First Lady's dark secret. The story they hid from America. From the outside looking in, the President and First Lady's marriage seemed flawless. The kind of partnership carefully staged for cameras, full of rehearsed smiles and handshakes that lingered just long enough to look genuine. The tabloids called them America's power couple. Magazine covers displayed glossy images of them embracing at rallies, their eyes locked in what the media described as undeniable chemistry. Commentators gushed over the way he pulled out her chair at state dinners, or how she adjusted his tie before he walked on stage. Every gesture was transformed into a symbol of unity. To the American people, their relationship wasn't just a marriage. It was a brand, a living advertisement of stability in turbulent political times. But the reality, as insiders would later confess, was far from perfect. In private, the couple barely spoke. Staff members described dinners where silence stretched across the table, broken only by the clinking of silverware. They lived in the same house, yet existed in separate worlds, the president buried in policy briefings, late-night calls, and endless meetings, while the First Lady floated from charity event to charity event, her smile plastered on for the cameras. The intimacy that once defined their early years together had evaporated, leaving behind only a facade. And while the public saw an image of love, those inside the White House saw cracks widening by the day. It wasn't unusual, of course, for powerful couples to live double lives. Washington has always been a theater, and politicians and their spouses are actors playing their roles. But for this First Lady, the script felt suffocating. She had once been ambitious herself, a woman with dreams and aspirations, not just a decorative figure. Before her husband's rise to power, she had pursued her own career, carving out an identity that was independent of him. But once the campaign began, everything changed. Advisors reminded her of her duty to stand by his side, to smile and nod, to be the perfect wife that America expected. Over time, her individuality was erased. What remained was an image crafted by consultants and PR teams, a ghost of the woman she once was. The strain of this performance began to show in subtle ways. At one event, sharp-eyed journalists noticed her hand stiffen when he tried to hold it. In another, a hot microphone caught her muttering under her breath, her expression frozen in polite disdain. Of course, the footage was buried, dismissed as out of context. But for those who knew her personally, these were signs of a deeper resentment brewing beneath the surface. She had become trapped in a gilded cage, admired by millions, but utterly alone. And yet, she played her part flawlessly. She appeared at hospitals, comforting children. She hosted foreign dignitaries with grace. She stood by her husband during scandals, smiling through gritted teeth as he denied allegations. She played the role of the loyal wife, because to do otherwise would have risked everything. In Washington, perception is survival. And for the First Lady, survival meant silencing her truth, until the day she could no longer keep it hidden. What no one realized was that behind the silk gowns and carefully rehearsed speeches, behind the photo shoots and soft interviews, a storm was gathering. A storm that would eventually tear down the image of the perfect marriage, and reveal a secret darker than anyone could have imagined. The first whispers began quietly, the way all scandals do. A staffer spotted her slipping into a car late at night, long after official schedules had ended. A journalist received an anonymous tip about private meetings at a secluded townhouse in Georgetown. Security logs showed unexplained movements, erased and rewritten by someone high enough to control access. At first, no one wanted to believe it. After all, the First Lady was America's sweetheart. Poised, loyal, devoted. The idea that she could be leading a double life seemed unthinkable. But Washington thrives on gossip, and soon the whispers spread like wildfire. Behind closed doors, aides traded theories in hushed tones. Some claimed she was having an affair, that loneliness had driven her into the arms of someone who actually listened. Others believed it was darker, that she had become entangled in a web of political favors and backroom deals, using her proximity to power as leverage. Whatever the truth, the First Lady was no longer just a silent figure at her husband's side. She had become a liability. Reporters tried to chase the story, but each time they got close, the trail went cold. Sources clammed up, files disappeared, and editors killed articles at the last minute. One investigative journalist, who claimed to have evidence linking the First Lady to secret meetings with a controversial businessman, suddenly left the country after receiving threats. His unfinished story never saw the light of day. This was no ordinary rumor mill. Someone somewhere was working hard to bury the truth. But whispers have a way of surviving. Staff members noticed changes in her demeanor. She grew bolder, more distant from her husband. At public events, she no longer pretended to laugh at his jokes. At private dinners, she left early, her absence noted but unchallenged. Slowly, the facade of the perfect couple began to crumble, and those who once idolized her started to question what they really knew about the First Lady. It was during this time that one insider, a close aide who had served her for years, began to notice troubling patterns. Late-night phone calls made from secure lines, coded messages scribbled on notepads, sudden trips that were disguised as charity work. Something was happening, something bigger than a simple affair. The aide, torn between loyalty and conscience, kept a private record of everything. It would be these records that later became the key to exposing her darkest secret. Still, the public remained blind. Television networks continued to paint her as the devoted wife. Social media fawned over her outfits and charity speeches. To the outside world, she was still flawless. But inside the White House, those whispers of betrayal were growing louder, spreading like cracks through the marble walls of power. And soon, they would erupt into a revelation that no amount of spin could contain. Every scandal begins with a moment, a flash of truth so small it could almost be ignored. For the First Lady, that moment came in the form of a single name scribbled in the margins of a redacted intelligence memo. It was a name the public had never heard before, but one that insiders recognized immediately. A political strategist who had once been both a trusted ally and a dangerous rival to the president. A man whose sudden death, years earlier, had been written off as a tragic accident. He was found in a hotel room, his body collapsed beside a half-empty glass of wine. The cause was labeled natural causes, despite his relatively young age. But those who dug deeper suspected foul play. And now, the whispers linked the First Lady directly to him. At first, the theory seemed absurd. What would the First Lady have to do with the death of a strategist? But as documents resurfaced, hidden emails, deleted text logs, unfiled security reports, a picture began to emerge. The strategist and the First Lady had been in contact, regularly, intensely, and secretly, during the very years leading up to his death. Not only that, but witnesses recalled seeing her at the very hotel where he died. The connection was too strong to ignore. Journalists who stumbled across this link quickly found themselves silenced. One reporter had his laptop stolen from his locked apartment. Another received an anonymous envelope containing only a single bullet, a silent warning to back off. Still, fragments of the story survived, whispers on blogs, leaked messages on obscure forums. Documents slipped into the hands of those who knew how to read between the lines. Slowly, a chilling possibility began to surface. Had the First Lady been involved in his death? The idea was unthinkable, but the evidence was damning. The strategist had threatened to go public with information that could have destroyed the president's career. Sources claim he had proof of financial misconduct, possibly tied to international deals that skirted the law. If exposed, not only would the president's political empire collapse, but the First Lady's carefully crafted life would unravel overnight. And then, just as he prepared to leak his findings, he was dead. The more investigators looked, the more inconsistencies appeared. The toxicology report was incomplete. Hotel cameras had mysteriously malfunctioned during the critical hours. Security staff who had worked that night were reassigned and never spoke again. But the most chilling revelation came from the aide who had once served the First Lady faithfully. In her private notes, she described late-night meetings where the First Lady spoke of being cornered, of being ready to do whatever it takes to protect herself. It wasn't enough to prove guilt in a court of law, not yet. But in the court of public opinion, the story was explosive. The very idea that America's First Lady, the picture of grace and loyalty, might have played a role in covering up, or even orchestrating, the death of a political rival was enough to shake the foundations of trust in the White House. And this was the dark secret. The one carefully hidden beneath layers of polished speeches and glamorous appearances. A secret that, if revealed, would not only destroy her reputation but cast a permanent shadow over the presidency itself. Scandals do not survive in Washington by accident. They are either destroyed quickly or smothered beneath mountains of distractions. In this case, the cover-up was as sophisticated as any political operation in modern history. The president's team, desperate to protect both him and his wife, deployed the full machinery of government secrecy to keep the First Lady's secret buried. The FBI was the first line of defense. Investigators who tried to reopen the strategist's case suddenly found themselves reassigned to less glamorous posts. Border offices, fraud units in small towns, anywhere far from Washington. Those who refused to back down faced even harsher consequences. One agent was quietly pushed into early retirement, another resigned under the weight of relentless pressure. The message was clear. This trail was not meant to be followed. The CIA's role was subtler but equally effective. Intelligence files that might have revealed the strategist's communications with the First Lady vanished from archives. Entire databases were wiped clean, replaced with innocuous records that painted him as a man who simply drank too much and collapsed. It was character assassination, written into official history. By the time curious eyes reached the file, the story was already rewritten. Even the Secret Service, whose loyalty traditionally belongs to the presidency itself, became complicit. Logs of who entered and left the White House during critical weeks were altered. Digital timestamps were manipulated. One guard later confessed off the record that he had been ordered to forget seeing the First Lady slip out in the dead of night. When he refused, his career ended within months. Meanwhile, the administration waged war on the press. Journalists who sniffed too close were labeled conspiracy theorists. News outlets that tried to run the story faced lawsuits, financial audits, and a barrage of political pressure. Editors were told, in no uncertain terms, that publishing even a whisper of the First Lady's connection to the strategist's death would undermine national security. In Washington, national security is the shield that hides everything. But secrets have a way of slipping through the cracks. Whistleblowers leaked fragments of suppressed reports. Anonymous sources whispered about cover-ups. Independent bloggers pieced together timelines that mainstream media dared not touch. Slowly, the narrative began to shift. While the official story declared the strategist's death a tragic accident, the underground conversation painted a very different picture. One of betrayal, silencing, and a First Lady willing to cross lines that no one expected of her. And yet, the machinery of power held strong. Each time the story threatened to break through, it was drowned in distraction. A foreign crisis. A legislative battle. A celebrity scandal. The news cycle moved on, leaving the whispers buried. 4 years, the First Lady's secret remained hidden, sealed behind the walls of power, protected by those who had the most to lose if it ever surfaced. But no cover-up lasts forever. Eventually, the cracks became too large to patch, and the truth began to seep through in ways that even the White House could not control. And when it did, it would not only reveal the First Lady's dark secret, it would expose the lengths to which America's most powerful institutions would go to protect their own. To understand the First Lady's secret, you have to first understand the woman herself. Not the polished figure on the magazine covers, not the smiling face at state dinners, but the human being beneath the mask. She wasn't born into politics. Long before the cameras, the motorcades, the White House Christmas parties, she was a young woman with ambitions of her own. She wanted to write, to teach, to lead in her own right. Those who knew her in her youth described her as sharp, determined, unwilling to be overlooked. But when she married a man with political ambitions, the trajectory of her life shifted. Her identity was gradually consumed by his. At first, she embraced the role. Campaign life was intoxicating. The rallies, the crowds, the sense of importance. She learned to dress for the cameras, to smile at strangers as if they were lifelong friends. But the deeper her husband rose, the smaller her own world became. Every aspect of her life was scrutinized, controlled, measured. Advisors told her what to wear, what to say, when to laugh, when to pause. Her independence evaporated, replaced with the role of First Lady in waiting. By the time she entered the White House, she had been completely reshaped into a symbol, no longer a person. It was in this suffocating environment that her bitterness took root. Those close to her recall late nights where she would drink alone, muttering about being nothing more than a prop. Friends she had once confided in slowly drifted away, silenced by the weight of her new position. She had sacrificed her dreams, her freedom, even her voice, all for the sake of an image she no longer believed in. And underneath that resentment lay something darker. The growing conviction that she had been trapped, used, betrayed. Her secret, then, was not born purely out of malice but out of a deep hunger for control. In her diary, later leaked by insiders, she wrote chilling lines, "I will not be invisible forever. He thinks he can control me, but one day the world will see." These words weren't simply expressions of frustration. They were promises. Promises that her silence had limits. Psychologists who studied her later described her as a textbook case of suppressed ambition exploding into dangerous behavior. She had been forced to wear a mask for so long that her real self had splintered, fractured into pieces of rage, longing, and desperation. When she finally acted, when she allegedly became entangled in the strategist's death, it wasn't just about silencing a threat. It was about reclaiming power in the only way she believed possible. To the outside world, she remained the picture of elegance. She smiled beside her husband, cut ribbons at charity events, and appeared on morning television shows to talk about family values. But those who looked closer could see it, the tension in her eyes, the way her jaw clenched when his name was mentioned, the sharpness that crept into her voice when she spoke of loyalty. She was a woman at war with herself, trapped between the image she projected and the reality she lived. And this was the real tragedy of her story. She wasn't just a participant in a political marriage. She was its prisoner. Every move she made, every secret she kept, was shaped by the crushing weight of expectations. And in her desperation to escape, she crossed lines that would haunt her forever. The mask was still in place, but it was cracking. And soon, the world would see the woman behind it, not as the loyal First Lady America believed in, but as someone capable of betrayal, deception, and perhaps even murder. Secrets have a way of surfacing, no matter how deeply they are buried. For years, the First Lady's secret had been smothered beneath layers of denials, cover-ups, and distractions. But history shows us that the higher the walls built to protect a lie, the more dramatic the collapse when the truth breaks through. And that collapse began with a leak. It was small at first, a file uploaded anonymously to an obscure website. Buried among thousands of other documents, it contained a string of emails that appeared to link the First Lady directly to the strategist whose death had long been ruled an accident. At first, no one noticed. But then a journalist, already suspicious of the old case, stumbled upon it. Within days, the documents spread across underground networks, then onto social media, then finally into mainstream conversation. The whispers had turned into shouts. The White House scrambled to deny the leaks. Officials claimed the emails were fabricated, the result of a foreign disinformation campaign. Loyal surrogates flooded television shows, attacking journalists and accusing them of undermining democracy. But the more they fought, the more the story grew. New evidence surfaced, hotel receipts, witness statements, even an old photograph showing the First Lady entering the strategist hotel on the night he died. Piece by piece, the narrative she had fought so hard to bury was crumbling. The First Lady, once adored, now became a figure of suspicion. Headlines screamed questions the public had never dared ask before. Did she know? Was she involved? The dark side of the White House marriage. Overnight, her approval ratings plummeted. Protesters gathered outside the gates of the White House, demanding answers. Talk shows that once celebrated her fashion choices now dissected her facial expressions, searching for signs of guilt. Inside the White House, the atmosphere turned toxic. Allies abandoned her, staffers whispered about resigning, and even her husband, the man she had once stood beside as his greatest supporter, began to distance himself. In one particularly chilling moment, caught on a hot mic, the president was heard telling an aide, "She's not my problem anymore." And yet, the First Lady refused to break. In public, she denied everything. She gave interviews insisting on her innocence, framing herself as the victim of political enemies. But behind closed doors, those closest to her described a woman unraveling. She raged at her staff, screamed at her husband, and in quieter moments, sobbed into the night. The mask was gone now, shattered by the weight of her own secret. The breaking point came when the aide who had kept records of her movements finally stepped forward. Handing over diaries, logs, and first-hand testimony, the aide painted a picture too detailed to dismiss. For the first time, the possibility of legal consequences loomed. Congressional hearings were discussed. Prosecutors whispered about opening cases. The First Lady, once untouchable, was now a suspect. And with that, The world finally saw her not as the symbol of elegance she had been marketed as, but as a flawed, complex, dangerous woman, capable of deception, betrayal, and the unthinkable. When the dust finally settled, the question was not simply whether the First Lady had committed a crime, but what her downfall meant for America. For decades, the public had been trained to see her as a symbol of grace, loyalty, and family values. She wasn't just the president's wife. She was the image of the nation's moral center. And when that image shattered, it didn't just stain her reputation. It rippled through the very fabric of American politics. The media called it the betrayal at the heart of the White House. For ordinary citizens, it was a wake-up call. If the First Lady, the woman who stood closest to power, the one trusted to embody integrity, could harbor such darkness, then who else in Washington was hiding secrets? Trust, already fragile in an era of corruption and scandal, collapsed further. Polls showed record-low faith in political institutions, and conspiracy theories multiplied. Some said she had been framed. Others believed she was part of a larger web of cover-ups stretching back decades. The truth, as always, remained buried beneath layers of power. Historians will likely debate her legacy for generations. Some argued that she was a victim, a woman crushed beneath the weight of impossible expectations, her humanity stripped away by the relentless machine of politics. In this reading, her dark secret was less about individual guilt and more about the consequences of a system that devours those who enter it. Others, however, saw her as a manipulator, a master of deception who used her position to silence threats and protect herself at all costs. But perhaps the most haunting legacy was personal. The marriage that had once been held up as the picture of American unity ended in silence. The president distanced himself publicly, focusing on his agenda, while she vanished from the spotlight. No more interviews, no more photo ops, no more cheerful holiday speeches from the East Room. The First Lady who had once defined elegance and loyalty was now a ghost, remembered not for her charm but for her secret. The impact stretched far beyond Washington. Women across America, who had once admired her, were left conflicted. Was she a cautionary tale about the dangers of losing yourself in a man's shadow? Or was she, in some twisted way, a symbol of rebellion, a woman who refused to remain invisible, even if her methods were unforgivable? For Empire Leaks, the lesson was clear. Power doesn't just corrupt men, it consumes everyone it touches. And the First Lady's story was a stark reminder that the White House, for all its grandeur, is not immune to the same betrayals, crimes, and tragedies that unfold in ordinary homes across the country. The only difference is that when secrets explode there, they shake the entire world. Her legacy is this: a reminder that behind every polished speech and choreographed smile lies a human being, flawed, desperate, and capable of anything. And that truth, once exposed, changes the way we see not just her, but the institution she represented. And so, the story ends not with a verdict, but with a question. A question that echoes beyond the marble walls of Washington, beyond the glare of cameras, into the living rooms of every citizen who once believed in the perfect image of power. If the First Lady could hide a crime inside the White House, what else is being hidden from us? Think about it. We are told every day that our leaders embody integrity, that their families represent the nation's highest ideals. But history teaches us something very different. History teaches us that behind every smiling photo, there is another story. A story of lies, betrayal, greed, and sometimes, blood. This is not just a tale of one woman's dark secret. It is a window into how power operates. Power protects itself. Power lies. Power kills. And power expects us to forget. But forgetting is dangerous. Because when we forget, we allow the cycle to repeat. That is why Empire Leaks exists. To remind you that the stories they want buried are the ones that matter most. The First Lady's dark secret may have shocked the world, but it is only one piece of a larger puzzle. From murder-for-hire plots to secret telegrams demanding gold, from hidden bank deals to assassinations masked as accidents, the truth is always stranger, darker, and more dangerous than the official story. So ask yourself, if the First Lady could deceive the world for years, how many other secrets are sitting in locked safes right now, waiting for the right leak to bring them into the light? We don't just tell stories here. We uncover them. And we won't stop, because the moment we stop asking questions is the moment we surrender to the lies. If you've been watching this far, you already know, you're not like the others. You don't settle for the surface. You want the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's terrifying. And that truth is what Empire Leaks will continue to bring you. no matter how deep we have to dig. So subscribe now, hit the bell icon, and join us for the next investigation. Because the First Lady's dark secret may be over, but the secrets of power are endless. And the next story we uncover might be the one that changes how you see the world forever. This is Empire Leaks, where the truth, no matter how dark, will never stay buried.